What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel where we dive into all things Rogue and Season of Discovery. Today we're going to be talking about what runes would be great to see in Phase 2 that would shake up the Rogue gameplay. First, we have runes I would hope to see that would greatly benefit rogues in some aspect or another, whether it's tank, DPS, single target, or AoE. Now the first rune is Fan of Knives. Sprays knives at all enemies within 10 yards, dealing physical damage and applying your active poisons at their normal rate. Deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets. I think this is the rune we're most likely to see. It's a great on-demand AoE damage ability and would be a great way for tank rogues to generate AoE threat and for DPS rogues to do some AoE damage outside of their Blade Flurry window. Next we have Shuriken Tornado. Focus intently, then release a Shuriken Storm every second for the next 4 seconds. Now this is a similar move to Fan of Knives, except there is a slight wind-up animation, and then it essentially casts a Fan of Knives every second for 4 seconds automatically. During this time, you are free to cast other abilities. This is a very energy efficient way to deal AoE damage. Even though it costs 60 energy, it deals 4 blasts of AoE damage, which casting 4 Fan of Knives would cost 140 energy, and it does it faster. The downside to this would be its cooldown, meaning it's not on demand, and if you pop it too late into the fight, it could cast its last blast after everything dies, losing value. For tanks, this would be a solid way to generate AoE threat while still being able to react to things happening around you. However, with a cooldown, it means once you're done, you are back to not having much AoE threat. For DPS, this is great because you can be building combo points while it's firing off, and be building instead of spending while still doing AoE damage. Next is Blade Rush. Charge to your target with blades out, dealing physical damage to the target and all nearby enemies. While Blade Flurry is active, damage to non-primary targets is increased by 100%. Generates 25 energy over 5 seconds. Now this is the move I would like to see the most. It's the perfect way to open up on a pack. It's a charge, an AoE, and it generates energy. For tanks, this is an incredible move to start the fight. You generate some snap threat on all the mobs and generate energy to begin damaging and building more threat. It's also a great opener for DPS because of the damage and the energy generation, and it would be something both would use in single target fights because of the energy regen. Now we have Secret Technique. Finishing move that creates shadow clones of yourself. You and your shadow clones each perform a piercing attack on all enemies near your target, dealing physical damage to the primary target and reduced damage to other targets. Anyone who has used this move knows how good it is and how cool it is. It would be an excellent AoE finisher for both tanks and DPS. There is a couple downsides though. One, how combo points are stored on the enemy. You often don't get max combo points before you need to use it or lose it in an AoE pack. This means you're often going to be using it at 3 to 4 combo points and not getting the full value. Also, with a 1 minute cooldown, this would make using it at a low combo point even worse because it's not something you could cast all the time. That being said, this would still be the best AoE finisher we could get. Next, Dancing Steel. Now the retail version extends the duration of Blade Flurry by 3 seconds and increases the targeted hits by 3. What I would like to see is a variation of this. Instead of extending the duration, turn it into a toggle. Increase the target's hit by 2 to 3 and reduce all damage to the non-primary target by 50%. This is something I could see angled at tanks, as threat gen on multiple targets even with reduced damage would be phenomenal, and turning it into a toggle instead of a 2-minute cooldown would eliminate the AoE threat issue for rogue tanks. I could even see removing the attack speed to get this put in, but hopefully not. Next is every rogue's favorite move, Roll the Bones. Now hear me out, I know this is a hot take to say Roll the Bones, but I would not want the retail version. I would not want it as a finisher. I would want a 1 to 3 minute cooldown, and the roll would give you buffs based on the runes you have equipped. For example, base it on your chest rune. If you have just a flesh wound, it can AoE taunt, explode like dynamite, or give you 5 seconds of Blade Flurry at 100% damage to all targets. If you had Deadly Brew on, it could poison bomb and dot everything, or it could improve poison applications like in Venom, or it could speed up the tick rate of poisons and bleeds. If you had Slaughter from the Shadows, make backstab cause a bleed, ambush without stealth, things like that. It would create some synergy in builds and be less RNG and more based on the decisions you made when using specific runes. Now I also thought up a couple cool runes that I would really like as a rogue tank. As far as I know, these haven't been in any X packs, they're just ideas I thought of while tanking. But the first rune is called Counter Strike. Parrying instantly counterattacks the target for physical damage, generating a high amount of threat. Now I thought of this because I love the idea of a defensive AoE threat generator, and it would lean into the idea of parry rogues. Essentially, the more a mob is attacking you and the more you parry it, the more threat you generate on them, even if it's not the target you're attacking. Now, the damage is less important than the threat generation, but it would add a little AoE damage for tanks. Another plus is it would scale with pack size. If I pulled 2 and I'm parrying 2 mobs, I'm generating threat on those 2, but if I pulled 5 and I'm parrying 5 mobs, I'm still generating threat across all 5 mobs. Now, you would still need to generate the snap threat on the mobs, but once you have them, it would be easier to hang on to them. The second rune I thought up is Flashbang. Now, this is kind of out of the actual game itself. It's not something that's been in the game, but it's based off of something in the game. So, Flashbang. Toss a flash grenade at the target location, taunting all targets in the area. Essentially, it's an AoE taunt version of Distract. I think it'd be really unique to have an AoE taunt you could throw. That way, if a mage is AoEing, it pulls off you and then starts running, and they have 2 to 3 mobs on them, you could just throw it and pull the mobs back. Now, because of how similar this is to Distract, I could see it replacing Distract the way Tease replaces Feint, but as a tank, I'd take that trade-off. Now I want to dive into some runes that would improve combo point generation and energy regeneration. In Classic, both of these are so static that it's limiting to what we could get in the future as finishers or maintenance buffs. Imagine trying to maintain 2 Slice and Dices and Envenom. We just don't have the energy or combo points to do that efficiently. So here's a couple runes I think would help open up our rotation. First, we have Honor Among Thieves. When anyone in your group critically hits with a damage or healing spell or ability, you have a 100% chance to gain a combo point on your current target. This effect cannot occur more than once every second. Now, this rune might be a little strong. If it were implemented the same way Wild Strikes or Wind Fury is, where you would only generate combo points off crits from people in your group, I still think you do end up getting an extra combo point about every second, which would be great to have, but it might be too strong in Classic. Right now, we're generating a combo point every 4 seconds if you're starting at 0 energy, so this would give us 2 to 4 combo points in that window, which seems a little too good to be true, but it'd be a fun rune. Next, we have Fatal Flourish. Your offhand attacks have a 50% chance to generate 10 energy. Now, this is the rune I think is most likely to happen if they were to give us an energy rune. With such a high chance to miss dual wielding, it reduces how often this would proc because it's based off successful hits, but 10 energy periodically would really help when you miss a builder and get refunded energy, but it puts you at a weird number, or when energy ticks and you get 19 instead of 20. I think this would really help balance those negatives while not really being overpowered. Lastly, we have Combat Potency. Now, this is the one I see us least likely to get. Increases energy regeneration rate by 25%. Pretty simple, but an effective way to improve energy. Now, this would mean you get 25 energy a tick instead of 20, because 20 divided by 4 is 5, which is a big change in Classic. I know you might be thinking it's only 5 energy, how good could it be? But let's break it down. If you time your first Sinister Strike right before your energy tick hits, it looks like this. You have 100 energy in Sinister Strike, it drops to 60, then ticks to 85. You Sinister Strike again, it drops to 45, ticks to 70. Sinister Strike down to 30, ticks to 55. Sinister Strike down to 15, ticks to 40, and you get one more Sinister Strike. Now, I know energy ticks every 2 seconds and Sinister Strike is a 1 second GCD, but you see what I mean by how we would get a ton more energy over the duration of our opener than we currently do. So because of how much of an improvement this would be, I think it is very unlikely. Next, we've got some defensive runes. The first one being Cloak of Shadows. Provides a moment of magic immunity, instantly removing all harmful spell effects. The cloak lingers, causing you to resist harmful spells for 5 seconds. Now, that's the retail one, and I think that would probably tip the scales too much in PvP. I think Classic PvP is both very RNG, but also very cut, where this class beats this class on an equal playing field, and I think that version of Cloak would tip the scales pretty heavily. What I would like to see is Cloak become a 10% magic damage mitigation for 15 seconds. I think that would be pretty fair in PvP, and it kind of puts us in line with other tanks. Kinda. Now, Bear and Warrior have a 20% and 10% flat damage mitigation that also affects magic damage, so obviously that's better, but this could help with bursts of incoming magic damage. I would love it to be a flat 10% magic damage mitigation rune that we would wear on occasion, but I don't see that happening. Granted, it's a very situational rune, but I think it would be nice to have. Next is a rune I would love to see, Smoke Bomb. Creates a cloud of smoke in an 8-yard radius around the rogue for 5 seconds. Enemies are unable to target in or out of the smoke. Allies take 10% less damage while within the cloud. I love the idea of a tank having a cooldown that protects the raid. You're the tank, the front line of the raid protecting the group. The idea of a raid coming to you for protection for big raid-wide damage is very cool and fitting for the tank role, and DPS could use it too. It's not a damage ability, but the utility of not being able to be targeted in the smoke would be really cool in PvP, and damage reduction would play into the self-sufficient rogue, personal responsibility in raids. Now we gotta put on the list combo points being on you and not the mob. I love the idea, it's great pretty much across the board for rogues, but I can see it being a bit too much in classic and also kind of taking away the feel of the classic rogue. Nonetheless, this would be a solid quality of life improvement and definitely an overall DPS improvement for rogues. Let's talk about what I don't want to see in Phase 2, and let's start with a rune that I think we're kind of likely to get. Dark Brew. Your attacks that deal nature, poisons, or bleed damage now deal shadow damage instead. Shadow damage increased by 10%. I think with Nomer coming and the likely possibility that we see mechs that are immune to bleed and damage, that they see this as a way to keep us in the fight by giving us replacement damage for P2. What's bad about it is bleed damage ignore armor, which made it very good. Shadow damage can be resisted, which as we saw in BFD made casters not good, so much so that they had to nerf the resistance on the bosses. So this would alleviate the pain in losing bleeds and poisons, but it wouldn't be a replacement I'd be happy to see. Retail Roll the Bones. We already talked about my version of Roll the Bones and how I would like it to play out if they gave it to us. Plus, the buffs in Roll the Bones couldn't really fit into Classic anyways, so I'm pretty sure we don't see the retail version carry over. More finishers. With our combo point and energy generation, I can't see us fitting more finishers or maintenance buffs into our rotation efficiently unless we get an improved regenerations. So we can't have one without the other. Secret Technique is an exception due to the fact that it would only be used in AoE and it has a cooldown, so you wouldn't be using it every single time you got your combo points. I also don't want to see utility runes. Now I just said a bunch of utility runes in the defensive runes category, but what I mean is runes that increase sprint duration by 5 seconds or reduce cooldown on blind, things that don't feel new or fun to play. If you're giving me utility, give me something I can use often and feels good to use. So after going through all these runes, I want to pick my top 5. These are the runes that if Blizz said, hey, we saw the list, pick 5 and they'll be in the game. So I'm going to start with Blade Rush. I think it's such a cool move. It would fit into Classic pretty easily, and with Warriors having a charge, Bears having a charge, and Metalocks having a charge, I think it's fair we also have one. Second is Counter-Strike. I know this is a rune I made up, but I think it would be really cool for rogue tanks. Like I said, I love the idea of a defensive threat generator, and it would pair incredibly with Blade Rush. Charge in, AoE, Blade Dance, and immediately jump into a threat generation window with all the mobs in the pack. Smoke Bomb. I talked about it a little earlier, but it would be so cool for the tank to be able to save the raid or help protect them from damage, and it's such a rogue move that I think it fits into the lore as well. Fatal Flourish. Being able to generate energy periodically could really help across all rogue archetypes. It wouldn't be insanely strong due to the high miss chance, but it would help us build and spend combo points. Fan of Knives. Now I think this is the best AoE damaging ability for both DPS and tank rogues. It would do damage, generate combo points, and also be an excellent way to generate threat. Now we got an honorable mention, Dancing Steel. This, if implemented the way I talked about it earlier, would probably be the best AoE rune for both tank and DPS rogue. It's the most consistent AoE DPS and AoE threat generation we could get. The only reason it's not in the top 5 is because it would need to be redesigned a little in order to be implemented properly. Now I have one last question before we wrap up, and that is, what runes do you want to see in Phase 2? Post them in the comment section below and let's talk about it. I love hearing new ideas and new ways to play rogue, so let me hear your wish list. Until next time, guys.